Miss Riky stood in front of the large curved holoscreen in her classroom, trying to ignore the slight flutter in her chest. She had faced warlords during peace negotiations. She had disarmed a quantum bomb during her cadet years. And yet, nothing filled her with more dread than what was about to unfold this morning. Teaching human biology, that the class wasn't even fully seated, and yet the air vibrated with suppressed anticipation. Eyes, or in some cases bioluminescent pupils, flickered toward her as if she were about to drop forbidden knowledge, which, in a way, she was. She sipped her black coffee with a quiet hiss of pleasure. ZRA physiology responded to caffeine almost as fervently as humans did, but it was also her defense mechanism. If she kept sipping, she didn't have to talk yet. Behind her, the first slide displayed a very average human male in gym shorts doing push-ups. She hadn't chosen that image lightly. A harmless beginning, something that would seem mundane to a human, but to her students, the sight was a paradox. "All right," she said finally, her voice smooth and firm, slicing through the whispers. "Let's begin." Silence. Not even the jinn were tapping their fingers nervously, and that species couldn't stop twitching under normal circumstances, a sure sign of psychological suppression or extreme focus. "Let me preface this by saying human biology is not for the faint of heart," Miss Riky continued. "If you feel faint, please signal me. If you feel excited, please don't." But drew a ripple of laughter, nervous, restrained, but real. Now she gestured to the image behind her. "This is not a warrior. This is not a champion. This is what the humans call average." A dozen appendages stiffened, wings fluttered, feathers puffed, mandibles clacked in horror. She switched the slide. "This is what they look like when mildly annoyed." A second image showed a human female median, stretching, muscles flexed in soft morning light. Several students blinked rapidly. A few leaned forward instinctively, as if trying to interpret a threat posture they didn't consciously understand. "It's not that they're terrifying by nature," Miss Riky explained, beginning to pace slowly. "It's that their biology ignores the rules most of us evolved to respect." She tapped the screen again. Heat retention, multi-phase adrenaline surges, neural reward loops tied directly to physical contact, and of course, double quotes, she sighed, the pheromones. That word. The class reacted like she'd activated a security siren. The opticien began preening nervously. The owl beside her fidgeted under her hood. Even the Carlin leaned back slightly, their dual hearts thudding in syncopated rhythms. "Yes, the pheromones," she said again. "We'll get there, but first, let's discuss why they sleep so much, and why no one in the galaxy knows how they still manage to win wars." She raised one scaled brow, ready for that mystery. The students were, and Miss Riky could feel that this was going to be a very long, very chaotic day. Miss Riky tapped her claw against the screen, and the image changed to a thermal scan of a human at rest, body aglow in a spectrum of reds and yellows. To any species familiar with infrared biology, the image was unsettling. To the students in her class, it looked like a reactor core preparing to breach. "This," she said calmly, "is a human in a sleeping state." Murmurs rippled across the rows of students. "You're lying," one of the jinn whispered in disbelief, voice echoing slightly through their voice modulator. "I am not," Miss Riky replied flatly. "That's baseline temperature during REM sleep, not even under duress. That's just how they are." She let the slide linger, watching the different species process the information. Some leaned closer, others leaned back, their minds working overtime to reconcile the raw biological truth with their cultural assumptions about fragility and warmth. "You see, humans are inefficient in all the most terrifying ways. Their bodies run hot, their sleep cycles are short and fractured, their metabolic rate is high, and yet somehow they thrive." A yellow Ural raised her hand. "But inefficient species burn out. Their cells die faster. They destabilize." "How do they?" "They compensate," Miss Riky said, aggressively. Another slide appeared, this time a set of graphs comparing glucose spikes and neural activity across 10 known species. Human data was erratic, chaotic. The spikes looked like combat telemetry. The rest were serene waves, predictable, smooth, comforting. "Most of our species regulate energy. They store, they ration humans." She paused. "Humans don't store energy. They spend it." Apo gasped softly. "But why?" Miss Riky turned to face the class fully, her expression neutral. "Because it's not in their nature to conserve. It's in their nature to consume, to adapt, to outpace. If their body fails, they rebuild it. If it hurts, they medicate it. If it dies well, there's always another human ready to keep going. Silence. Even the chittering young optician, who could rarely hold still, were motionless. Miss Riky allowed herself a long, slow breath. This was the part of the lesson that always cracked through the civility of the room. The realization that the species they mocked for their emotional volatility and chaotic nature were biologically more dangerous than most weaponized organisms in known space. Another image. A human child sleeping upside down on a couch, limbs splayed, drooling, into a pillow. This is what they look like when they're vulnerable. A nervous chuckle, and still somehow they survive predators, environmental disasters, plagues, radiation exposure, toxic plants, self-inflicted injuries, and, more astonishingly, each other. A brave Carlin raised her webbed hand. Dude, they evolve faster than us. Miss Riky nodded once. Yes, rapidly. Too rapidly. Their DNA is riddled with redundancies and broken code, but it adapts, recombines, mutates. They have a resilience built into the very bones of their species. Another slide. An MRI scan. A human brain lighting up in near-total activity even during rest. Despite what we've believed for decades, the human brain is not dormant at rest. It replays memories, runs simulations, dreams. They rehearse survival in their sleep. That one landed hard. A low whistle from the back of the room broke the silence. No wonder they win. A djinn muttered, fingers twitching nervously. Yes, Miss Riky said softly. Now imagine one of these creatures waking up next to you. Their body radiating heat, their scent infused with stimulant pheromones, their brain already calculating possibilities. She leaned forward, gaze sweeping the classroom, and now, try not to run. Miss Riky didn't have to say anything. The moment the next slide appeared, a subtle thermal overlay of a human body resting beside another. With faint tendrils of warmth radiating between them, the class went utterly still, not quiet, still. Even the air filtration hum seemed to dim in reverence or fear. Now, she began with a cautionary sigh. We enter the chemical warfare section. Somewhere in the back, a point student whimpered and closed their eyes. Pheromones, Miss Riky continued, are not exclusive to humans. Many species use them for mating, signaling danger, or claiming territory, but human pheromones are unique in both their range and their effect. The holoscreen showed a time-lapse of a sealed room, daylight fading through the window while infrared markers recorded heat and particles dispersing from a human male asleep under a blanket. Release them most when sleeping, she explained. Not from glands, not from conscious intent. Their entire bodies exhale pheromones like fog. It seeps into the fabric of their rooms, their furniture, even their companions. Carlin leaned forward nervously. You mean they weaponize sleep? Miss Riky gave a humorless smile. They don't mean to. But yes, a human nap taken in the wrong place has set off at least 7 incidents of psychological contamination aboard Confederation vessels. They call it crashing on the couch. Is it dangerous? A djinn asked, arms folding anxiously. That depends, Miss Riky said, tapping to the next slide, a multi-species chart outlining pheromone responses. To prey-evolved species like the Nemi, it triggers pure panic. The scent mimics that of a predator. Strong, dominant, subtle but unmistakable. A few students shifted uncomfortably, but for predator-evolved species, she hesitated, her tail flicking slowly behind her. It creates something else. Stimulation, euphoria, in some cases, arousal, even without context, even without consent. Half the class avoided eye contact. A few flushed. One Carlin actually started sweating. Some have likened the experience to being hunted affectionately, she added, deadpan. That got a ripple of strained laughter, but no one truly relaxed. And they're unaware, a point asked softly. They're aware. They just forget, Miss Riky said. Humans evolved surrounded by their own pheromones. They no longer feel them, like gravity, or their own scent. A new slide now, an accidental snapshot of a human male kissing the forehead of a Zero female. Both relaxed, eyes closed. Miss Riky didn't comment for a long moment. There's another reason, she said at last. One that no Federation biologist has dared to publish, because it undermines too much of what we assumed about evolution and control. She looked across the sea of tense waiting faces. Humans. Pair bond, through pheromones, gasps. Audible, multiple. Yes, that's why Zero soldiers stationed near humans report mood disturbances. That's why diplomatic officers develop attachments to Earth envoys after 3-day negotiations. That's why you wake up thinking about a human you passed in a corridor 2 weeks ago. Her voice softened, but the weight in it grew. Is not your fault, it is biology, it is programming. And humans are masters of this invisible war. She took a long sip of her cooling coffee, trying to shake the heat pooling in her own skin. When you sleep near a human, neurobiology changes, your scent adjusts, your body calibrates. The Federation calls it proximity bonding. On Earth, they just call it cuddling. A dozen claws scratched nervously against desktops, which leads us, she said, changing the slide again, to the most feared biological event in Confederation history. The screen showed a human hugging another sentient species from behind. The class shuddered. Yes, Miss Riky said grimly. The hug, the embrace, the full contact ambush. And with that, the entire room leaned in, fascinated, horrified, aroused, and utterly unprepared. Miss Riky stood beside the glowing screen, feeling the slow, creeping heat of remembered experiences creep up the nape of her neck. Her tail coiled slightly, her claws flexed unconsciously at her sides. She could see it in the eyes of every student, predator and prey alike. They felt it too. Some couldn't explain it. Others refused to admit it. She cleared her throat. We've spoken of pheromones, she said, her voice steady again. But what comes next is less chemical and more deliberate. She tapped the screen. The next image appeared, an archival capture of two humans walking side by side. The female's hand lightly grazed the male's fingers. Their hands met, fingers weaving together. A simple act, innocent to most species. In the room, someone let out a faint, involuntary whimper. This is what humans call holding hands, Miss Riky said calmly. It's casual, it's frequent, it's used between family, lovers, even allies. Why? Asked a powder blue Ural, her head frills twitching in a confused flutter. It's so unshielded, so open. Miss Riky nodded. Yes, that's the point. Humans use touch to communicate trust, vulnerability, connection. Their skin is their language. Another slide. A hand pressed to another's shoulder, a forehead resting gently against a chest, a palm placed at the small of the back, can manipulate entire negotiations through nonverbal contact. There are documented instances of humans winning trade deals without speaking, just by knowing where and when to touch. She turned to the class, and it's not accidental. It's instinct, learned. And once they learn you, she didn't finish that sentence. She didn't need to. Some of the Optician students were gently preening their feathers to calm their nerves. A Carlin in the front row was shifting her weight uncomfortably, glancing at her own clawed fingers. Then came the final slide. The kiss. It filled the screen. A human male. Eyes closed, lips gently pressed to the corner of a woman's mouth. Not staged, not provocative, intimate, soft, honest. Miss Riky let it linger. Is the apex weapon of human intimacy. Gasps, audible again. A kiss is more than flesh contact. It is layered, calibrated, biological. It delivers pheromones. It transfers warmth. It floods the nervous system with endorphins. The brain ignites. Muscles release. Heart rates sink. Blood flow accelerates. She slowly turned back to her students. And they do this ... for fun. One Jin student dropped his datapad with a metallic clatter. No one reacted. There are different types, Miss Riky continued. Each one carries its own meaning. Cheek, forehead, nose. But the lips are where chaos begins. She pulled up a diagram of a kiss escalation chart, a piece of scientific art that would have been humorous if not terrifying in its accuracy. A simple peck led to head tilting. Tilting led to lip engagement. That led to arm entwinement, full body contact, and eventually pair bonding. And yes, she added, before anyone could interrupt, there's a timer. A clawed hand shot up. I am sorry. A timer. Yes, Miss Riky said flatly. Scholars believe that human lip contact when extended passes emotional thresholds. A kiss under 1 second is light. 2 to 3 seconds suggests affection. Beyond 5, and the brain begins to shift into possessive imprinting. A soft murmur swept across the classroom. That's how they get you. Her voice dropped. Lower. You don't even realize it's happening. The contact, the scent, the pheromones, and then the kiss. A few students looked visibly dazed. Miss Riky paced slowly in front of the class. There are planets, now entire colonies, that ban human diplomats from engaging in physical greetings. There are stations where hugs are registered as weapons under social conduct codes. There are races who have requested visual-only interactions with humans for their own safety. She paused, then more softly, and there are species, mine, who adapted instead. There was a long silence. Every student watching, hanging on her next breath. Miss Riky smiled faintly. I adapted, she said, and I lost. But it's not defeat, it's surrender. to something warm, and terrifying, and real. The class sat motionless until one bold optician feathers slicked back against their head, raised a single finger. Miss Riky, were you? Kissed the silence was nuclear. She stared at the student for a moment, and then just once she let her lips curl upward. Yes, she said softly. I was, and I never quite recovered. Miss Riky let the room fall silent again, not just silent, hushed, reverent. Her confession still hung in the air, thick and scented with the invisible weight of curiosity, envy, and discomfort. A few students scribbled furiously, others stared blankly ahead, and one or two simply blinked in a daze. But she wasn't finished. Far from it. We've discussed touch, she said, voice softer now. Now let's discuss force. She tapped the control panel. The screen flickered. New footage. Loaded, grainy, time-stamped, marked with official Confederation military insignia. The image stabilized just as a young human male barefoot, bleeding, screaming lifted a collapsed shuttle hatch nearly twice his weight. Gasps. One Jin whispered. That's fake. No, Miss Riky said. It's not. She paused for effect, letting the truth settle like cold iron. Then she stepped aside, allowing the footage to continue. The human crawled beneath the hatch, dragging another soldier from the wreckage. He staggered backward, collapsed, and lost consciousness beside them. This is what they call hysterical strength, Miss Riky said, her tone turning clinical. In moments of intense emotional pressure, usually involving danger to a loved one or offspring, humans can access up to 100% of their muscle potential. The Ural in the back twitched visibly. Most species already operate near full capacity. You push harder, you tear tendons, collapse your own structure, but humans limit themselves. Their brains install governors' neural locks to keep their own power caged. Another slide, a diagram of a human muscular system lit in red, gold, highlighting compression limits and neural bypasses. In these moments, humans can break those locks. They become stronger, much stronger. But the cost is immense: muscle tears, spinal fractures, neurological seizures, and collapse from caloric deficit. It doesn't matter. They do it anyway. She turned slowly, her fronds trembling faintly. With the memory, I watched a human mother lift a crashed medical unit off a 6-year-old child on a colony moon. Her arms broke, both of them. I saw the bones shatter. I saw the skin split. She didn't stop. A student gagged quietly. Another image appeared. A combat scan in infrared. Human soldiers running through a battlefield, bullets, explosions, one of them falling, only to get back up with a roar, dragging 3 bodies behind him, 2 friends, 1 enemy. This was during the Daria uprising, Miss Riky said. That man was hit in the side by fragmentation. His left lung collapsed. He kept fighting for 6 minutes before passing out. He survived. Daria did not. She advanced the footage. It blurred, it shook, it ended in static. There are stories, she continued. Stories of humans ripping doors off station walls. Stories of humans shattering riot armor with their bare hands, pulling trapped victims from burning wrecks, holding up crumbling ceilings while shouting for others to run. She faced her students again. We used to think they were myths, propaganda, but now, she swept her hand across the screen, slide after slide. Medical records, post-action, reports, photos of bent steel, shattered composite, impressions of fists on walls meant to withstand atmospheric decompression. They're real. A male optician raised a trembling feather. But ... why aren't they always that strong? Miss Riky nodded at the question. Because if they were, they would die. A human using full strength burns through calories faster than any known predator. Their own heat begins to cook them from the inside. That's why they sweat so much. That's why they eat so often. That's why they eat so far they collapse. Another slide. A soldier asleep against a rock wall, dirt-caked, bloodied, smiling faintly. They crash, mid-battle, mid-march, sometimes mid-sentence. If a human pushes past their limit, the brain shuts down, forces them to rest, to repair. She paused, and the next time they wake up, they're ready to do it again. No one spoke. A Poe in the corner gently curled his limbs around himself like a cocoon. The Jinn no longer tapped their pads. The room had shifted, no longer just curious students, but witnesses of something ancient and primal. Miss Riky took a breath. Strength, for most of us, is a calculated asset, a thing rationed, protected, but for humans, it's a gift and a curse. They don't know their limits, so they often break past them. She lowered her hand, and when they fight, when they decide something is worth protecting, stars help whoever stands in their way. The lights in the classroom dimmed again, and Miss Riky tapped the next slide with slow, deliberate precision. Gone were the battlefields and heroics. Now came the part that made even the bravest alien warriors tremble, not from OR, but from very real, very calculated fear. "Let's talk about disease," she said grimly. The screen flickered to life with a high-definition image of a petri dish. On it, a dozen strains of bacteria bloomed in angry reds, virulent greens, and ghostly yellows. Each was tagged E. coli, MRSA, influenza, A, staphylococcus, smallpox. "This," she continued, "is a standard swab from a human tongue." The collective inhale from her students was instant. No sterilization, no cleaning, just normal oral flora. That's what lives inside their mouths all the time. A djinn fainted quietly, their head clunking against the desk. Miss Riky didn't pause. You might wonder why the Federation's most advanced species are afraid of a little spit. But these are not ordinary microbes. Earth, as we now understand, is what we classify as a microbial crucible. A new slide appeared, Earth's surface, overlaid with a biotic density map. The screen glowed with violent activity. Every continent pulsed with infection potential. It's not just that they have bacteria and viruses. All planets do, but Earth's microorganisms evolve at unprecedented speeds. They fight each other. They develop resistance. They mutate, combine, and then adapt again. She turned slowly to face the classroom, and then humans evolved in that. Dead silence. Human immune systems aren't just reactive, they're combative. Every part of their body is a war front. Skin secretes oils that kill fungi. Their stomach acid can dissolve raw meat. Their blood clots in seconds. Even their tears contain antibacterial enzymes. One of the Collins students raised a trembling claw. "So, that's why we get so many shots here." Miss Riky nodded. "Yes. The station's medical bay is equipped to screen for over 600 strains of human-borne pathogens, most of which are harmless to them and lethal to us." She pressed her thumb to the display, and a new image flashed. A medical quarantine zone, bodies covered in shimmer cloths, biohazard signs in a dozen alien dialects. "This is from the Palbo incident." Several students stiffened. They'd studied it in history. A human child sneezed inside a crowded shuttle on its first day aboard the orbital platform. Within 6 hours, 12 alien species reported symptoms. Within 12 hours, 91 individuals were dead, and the child recovered after a nap and some soup. Murmurs of disbelief echoed like distant thunder. "We called it a fluke," she said. Then came the Yensu outbreak, the Herodin collapse, the Optician flu. Every time we traced the origin back to a human body, sometimes even one carrying no symptoms at all. A point student raised their hand hesitantly. "But why aren't they affected? Don't they get sick?" "Oh, they do," Miss Riky answered. "Often, but their bodies treat illness like a challenge. They fight, adapt, archive. Their immune systems keep a library of enemy signatures and deploy rapid defenses within hours, sometimes minutes." Another student muttered, "That's not biology. That's warfare." Miss Riky didn't correct them. "Even worse," she continued. "Human scientists enhance this process. They have something called vaccines, artificial memory, injections that train the body in advance for threats it hasn't even met yet." The djinn who had fainted earlier groaned and tried to sit up again. "And let's not even begin on antibiotics," she said, now pacing again. "They consume mold-grown toxins to kill bacteria in their own bloodstreams. They ingest silver, drink alcohol, bathe wounds in bleach, and then go to work the next day." One of the oral students shuddered. "They treat poison like medicine. They treat pain like an inconvenience," Miss Riky replied. A new image appeared, a side-by-side of two subjects, a Zero soldier and a human marine, both wounded in simulated combat. The Zero subject requested sedation after 15 minutes, she said. The human requested coffee. The room broke out into horrified whispers. A few students looked like they were considering dropping the course entirely. "Even the pathogens they carry," she went on, "fear them. There are viruses on Earth that evolved not to kill humans, because doing so would destroy their host. Some diseases simply hide inside them, waiting." She looked around slowly, her voice calm, quiet. "So when we talk about human strength, we're not just talking about muscle." She pointed to the slide again. "We're talking about a species that has domesticated suffering, weaponized illness, and can walk through plagues that ended civilizations." Her claws tapped once more, and the screen faded to black. "They don't mean to be dangerous," she finished, "but they are, simply by existing." No one spoke. Miss Riky folded her arms across her chest, her coffee long forgotten. "Next class," she said quietly, "we'll discuss their mating behaviors." Half the class moaned aloud. A few heads dropped onto desks in dread, and still, not a single student missed a note. Miss Riky stood at the center of her classroom, arms crossed, tail curling in slow, frustrated loops behind her. She knew this day was coming. Every term, no matter how carefully she planned the syllabus, no matter how thoroughly she exhausted the other lessons, biology always led here. To this. The hands went up before she could pretend to dismiss the class. Not just one. Not just the usual suspects. Every species. Every student. Dozens of eyes, round, slitted, compound, multi-lidded, fixed on her like predators circling wounded prey. Yes, she sighed, rubbing the bridge of her nose. I suppose we must talk about it now. She didn't need to clarify. They knew exactly what it was. Human mating, the final biological ambush. She tapped her pad, and the holoscreen lit up, not with explicit images, but with something far more dangerous. Data. Human reproduction is not biologically unique. She began, keeping her tone as dry and academic as possible. Mammalian, binary sexed in the majority. Fertilization, internal. Gestation, live. This is all within expected parameters. A few opticians lowered their feathers in disappointment. What is not expected, she continued, swiping to the next slide, is that none of it is required for them to engage in affection rituals. A still image appeared, a human couple, fully clothed, embracing beneath a tree, sunlight, smiles, hands clasped, foreheads touching. This is a prelude, she said, one that can last weeks, sometimes months before the act of mating even occurs. Tynel groaned. You mean, they delay on purpose? Yes, Miss Riky said, because for humans, mating is not solely reproductive. It is emotional, psychological, symbolic, it can be tactical, and perhaps worst of all, it can be accidental. Several students froze. They can fall into bonding without realizing it, she added. Physical contact, prolonged eye contact, shared meals, emotional confessions. These things begin to alter the human brain chemistry. The slide changed again, neural scans of a human in bonding mode. Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, norepinephrine, all flooding the brain like a chemical warfare detonation. They drown in it, Miss Riky whispered. And if you're nearby, you drown with them. One post-student lowered his datapad slowly. They infect us. With feelings, yes, Miss Riky said. Worse than any microbe. She tapped the display. New images rotated slowly, couples from every culture, human and alien. Azura wrapped in a blanket beside a human male, drinking cocoa, a djinn with fingers woven in a human's hair, a Ural clutching a bouquet with panic and delight on her face. Entire species have fallen to this, Miss Riky said quietly. The Karlan outlawed eye contact with humans after half their diplomatic corps applied for Earth visas. The Zam people tried resisting. We issued training programs, neural dampeners, touchless protocols. None of it worked. She paused. Because humans are not trying to seduce you. They are simply being themselves. A silence fell again, tense and stunned. Miss Riky turned slowly, and then, there's the kiss. Tynel threw her head back and groaned. Again, Miss Riky said. Because no amount of data replaces what happens, when you are kissed by a human who means it. She tapped the pad once more. A rotating diagram appeared. The kiss, a biological event. 36 muscle groups engage in a single kiss. Pulse increases, pupils dilate, sensory receptors in the skin light up like a solar flare. The lips themselves contain more nerve endings per square centimeter than almost any other human body. Part except for those involved in pain response. A djinn raised his trembling hand. So it hurts to be kissed. No, Miss Riky said. It's dangerously close to hurting. That's the point. The brain registers it as intense stimulation. It floods the body with endorphins to cope. And for some races, she trailed off. Several students shifted. Yes, she added, it has been known to cause imprinting, especially if repeated. Then came the final slide. A list, confederation, incident log. Ural Ambassador Vassarin resigned after being caught spoon-feeding ice cream to human secretary. Optician Fleet Captain Rox dismissed after unauthorized mating bond during war summit. Zumra Diplomat SE classified. Miss Riky cleared her throat and turned off the display, she said, lifting her chin. To summarize, she began counting on her clawed fingers. 1. Humans are walking biohazards. 2. Their bodies run hot enough to kill bacteria. 3. Their touch bypasses rational defense. 4. Their strength breaks containment protocols. 5. Their immune systems are predatory. 6. Their pheromones cause emotional trauma. And 7. She looked them all dead in the eye. 7 is the kiss. The kiss is war. There was a long pause, then Tyno leaned back and muttered, "Stars help us. And they haven't even evolved wings yet." Miss Riky smiled faintly. "No, they haven't, and I'd very much like to retire before they do." The class burst into laughter, exhausted, overwhelmed, fascinated beyond reason. And though none of them said it aloud, each of them thought the same thought. Stars above. How do we survive living with them? Miss Riky knew the answer. You don't survive humanity, you adapt. Or you fall in love.